Welcome back, listeners. Today, we're taking a deep dive into something, well, let's just say, a little on the darker side of the Star Wars galaxy.
Dark side. I was thinking more imposing, but yeah, I guess you could say that.
Here, we're talking about the Galactic Empire. We're focusing on its rise to power, how it expanded, and the ways it kept control over, well, pretty much everything.
It's a fascinating period, really complex.
Totally. And I know a lot of you are probably thinking about Palpatine scheming those massive Star Destroyers and, of course, the Death Star.
Right, the iconic symbols of imperial might. But to really understand the Empire, you have to go deeper.
Exactly. And that's where our main source for this deep dive comes in, Star Wars, The Rise and Fall of the Galactic Empire by Chris Kempshall.
Kempshall's work goes beyond just the battles and the flashy stuff. He digs into the politics, the economics, the social structures.
Yeah, the nuts and bolts of how this massive galaxy-spanning empire actually functioned.
And, just as importantly, how it ultimately collapsed.
Interesting. Maybe we'll save that for another deep dive. Yeah. But for now, let's start with the rise of Palpatine. I mean, he didn't just, wake up one morning wearing that black robe and declaring himself emperor, right?
Definitely not. It was a long game. I mean, we're talking years of careful planning, manipulating events. He was a master strategist.
The real puppet master.
Exactly. And the Naboo crisis, for example, was a crucial turning point. Now, the Trade Federation's blockade didn't last, of course.
True.
But it exposed some weaknesses in the Republic, right? And importantly, it created this climate of fear and uncertainty.
The perfect breeding ground for someone like Palpatine to exploit.
Right. And he was brilliant at playing on people's anxieties. He presented himself as the only one who could restore order, the strong leader the Republic needed.
And wouldn't you know it, that's how he got those emergency powers.
Yep. Emergency powers that, in the end, he never really relinquished. They became his stepping stones to, well, ultimate power.
Emperor Palpatine.
Emperor Palpatine. But here's the thing. Even as Palpatine was playing the role of the concerned senator, the defender of the Republic, there were signs, hints of the autocrat he would become. For example, the book mentions this thing about his appearance.
Oh, yeah, about how he intentionally chose to be depicted as older.
Exactly. And he specifically requested artists use older representations even when, he was actually younger.
Strange, right?
Well, some historians think it reflects this growing obsession with power and control. Like, as his actual appearance was changing, becoming more
sinister?
Well, let's say weathered, he was clinging to this idealized image of himself.
Frozen in time.
Exactly. Frozen at this moment of supreme power. Like, he was trying to control not just the galaxy, but even his own image.
Almost like he was trying to hide something.
Perhaps. And that desire for control went way beyond just his looks. It seeped into every aspect of his rule. In fact, there's even a theory that Palpatine, for all his scheming and ambition, might not have actually enjoyed ruling.
What? Really? You're saying he went through all that trouble to become emperor, and then he didn't even want to do the job?
Well, not exactly. More like he didn't enjoy the day-to-day management of the Empire.
So what? He just wanted to boss people around all day?
Kempshall argues that Palpatine was more interested in wielding power as a symbol, as this larger-than-life figure.
Okay, I kind of get that.
But the actual nitty-gritty of running a vast galactic empire, that might have bored him.
Interesting. So that obsession with power wasn't about managing a government. It was about...
about being the ultimate authority. And interestingly enough, some scholars argue that this kind of hands-off approach, this detachment from the actual work of ruling, actually contributed to the empire's downfall later on. But we'll get to that.
I'm definitely curious about that. But for now, let's talk about how this obsession with power translated into the empire's expansionist policies. Because they weren't just conquering for the sake of conquering, right? There had to be a reason.
Oh, absolutely. The empire's expansion was driven, in large part, by a huge need for resources.
Resources?
Yeah. I mean, think about it. They had this massive military machine to maintain.
Right. Thousands of Star Destroyers, legions of stormtroopers.
Exactly. And then there were all those ambitious construction projects, Death Stars, shipyards, you name it.
All of that requires a lot of raw materials.
A lot. And that's where those resource-rich worlds come into play, especially the ones that were designated as legacy worlds during the Republic.
Legacy worlds.
Yeah, these were planets that were protected, because of their unique ecosystems, cultural significance.
They were kind of like galactic national parks.
In a way, yes. But to the Empire, those protections were, well...
Obstacles.
Exactly. Obstacles to be removed. They needed those resources, and they were going to get them no matter what.
So much for environmental protection.
The Empire had different priorities. The book uses Samovar and Wadi Rafa as examples. They were known for having these really diverse ecosystems.
I remember reading about those planets.
Yeah, they were supposed to be protected. But the Empire, they just swooped in and started stripping them for everything they were worth.
No regard for the long-term consequences.
Nope. It was all about meeting their immediate needs. And that disregard for, well, anything that didn't directly benefit them, it wasn't limited to the environment either.
You mean how they treated people?
Exactly. When the Empire expanded, it wasn't always a peaceful process. Sometimes it involved displacing entire populations, subjugating them.
Kempshall talks about this doctrine of fear, using overwhelming force to basically crush any resistance.
Yeah, that was definitely part of their strategy.
And they were pretty brutal about it.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. The book mentions Ryloth and Mimban as examples.
I've heard of those.
They basically made examples of those planets. They used brutal tactics, showed no mercy.
Sending a message to anyone else who might be thinking about resisting.
Exactly. Grand Moff Tarkin, he was a big believer in this approach.
Tarkin. Wasn't he the one who oversaw the Death Star?
Yep, that's him. He was all about projecting strength, showing the Empire's might.
Making sure everyone knew who was in charge. It's like
Right.
they wanted to create this galaxy-wide panopticon, where everyone is constantly being watched, always aware of the Empire's power.
And too afraid to even think about rebelling.
Exactly. Fear was a tool of control. But even with all that brute force, I mean, couldn't they have just, dissolved the Senate and taken complete control right away?
Well, they did eventually get rid of the Senate, but it's interesting, they actually kept it around for a while.
Really? Why?
Well, I think it served a couple of purposes. First, it gave them this appearance of legitimacy.
Like they were still operating within the framework of the Republic.
Right. Even though behind the scenes, Palpatine was pulling all the strings. But I think the Senate also served another, maybe more important purpose.
What's that?
It was a tool for manipulating public perception. They could use the Senate to endorse their actions, give their policies a stamp of approval.
Making it seem like the whole galaxy was on board with what they were doing.
Exactly. Kempshall uses this example of Wobani.
Wobani?
Yeah, the planet that was turned into a giant labor camp.
Oh, right. I remember that.
Yeah, the Empire orchestrated this whole campaign to get the Senate to approve the project.
So they could claim it was all legal and above board.
Exactly. And of course, they pressured senators, made promises, maybe even used some threats.
We get the outcome they wanted.
Of course.
Yeah.
It was all about control, not just military control, but controlling the narrative, shaping how people saw the galaxy. And the Senate was a perfect tool for that.
Wow. It's scary how effectively they were able to manipulate the system. And this manipulation wasn't just limited to the political sphere, was it?
No way. They understood the power of information.
Propaganda.
You got it. They used the holonet, the galactic internet.
Everyone's always on the holonet.
Exactly. So the Empire flooded the holonet with their own messages. They controlled what information people saw, what stories got told.
So they could control how people thought.
Right. They even recruited celebrities, athletes, people with influence.
To promote their agenda.
Yep. They wanted to project this image of imperial citizenship as something desirable, something to aspire to. They knew that true control wasn't just about outward obedience, it was about shaping people's minds.
Wow, it's kind of disturbing how they were able to infiltrate everyday life like that.
It was a multi-layered strategy. I mean, they used brute force, political maneuvering, propaganda.
They had all the bases covered. But wasn't there also this darker side to their control? I mean, it wasn't just about maintaining order, was it?
You're right. There was this definite element of enforcing conformity. They wanted everyone to fit into their very specific mold.
So anyone who was different, anyone who didn't fit in.
They were seen as a threat, and they were often targeted.
Discrimination.
On a massive scale. They weaponized existing prejudices, turned people against each other.
Like intentionally.
Absolutely. They knew it was easier to control people if they were divided, so they targeted non-humans, anyone they deemed undesirable.
It's amazing how they were able to exploit existing tensions like that.
Kempshall talks about this governor on Talos, Governor Patan. He was notorious for using the education system to
To what?
basically segregate students, to instill prejudice at a young age.
Using schools to spread hate. That's
That's
just,
a chilling reminder of how power can be abused.
yeah. So we've got this picture of the Empire.
Yeah.
They're powerful, they're controlling, they're discriminatory. But they weren't perfect, right? I mean, they had to have faced some internal challenges, some contradictions.
Oh, absolutely. The Empire might have projected this image of strength and unity, but behind the scenes, things were a lot messier.
Well, maybe that's a topic for another deep dive. It's wild, right? I mean, this whole system built on fear and control. But makes you wonder, with all that power, how did they mess up so badly? How did they not see the rebellion coming?
Well, you've hit on a question that's fascinated historians and analysts for centuries. I mean, the Empire, on the surface, they projected this image of invincibility, strength, control, you name it. But behind the scenes, like you said, it was all built on fear.
Yeah, which works for a while, maybe.
Mm.
But it's not exactly a recipe for long-term stability, is it?
Not really. It creates this kind of pressure cooker environment. You know, sooner or later, something's got to give. And with the Empire, well, that something was the rebellion.
You'd think, though, a regime with that much power would be pretty much indestructible.
Right, you'd think so. But it's funny how power works. It's not always about raw strength, you know. It's also about legitimacy, about having people genuinely believe in your cause.
Yeah, I get that.
And the Empire, they were great at the first part, the strength thing. But the second part, not so much. They got obedience, yeah. But real loyalty, not really.
And thinking you can control people through fear alone? Well, that's a pretty big miscalculation.
Huge miscalculation.
Yeah.
Because what happens is you stifle dissent, you crush any opposition.
And you end up pushing people away.
Exactly. You drive them underground. And that's where rebellions are born.
So in a way, the Empire's very success, their obsession with control,
It actually backfired. They created the conditions for their own downfall.
it's a classic case of hubris.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, they got so caught up in their own power, they couldn't see what was happening right under their noses.
Exactly. They forgot one crucial thing. People crave freedom. They want autonomy. And when you take that away, well,
You're going to face resistance.
always. It's inevitable.
This has been a fascinating look into the Empire, I have to say. It's really made me think about how power works, how easily it can be abused, and how even the most powerful regimes can fall.
It's a story that's relevant no matter what galaxy you're in.
Absolutely. So to all our listeners out there, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and may the Force be with you.